Hi there, I'm Kathleen Jasper, and today I'm going to go through some quick grammar tips for you to use on your standardized grammar assessment. This video is going to help you no matter what grammar assessment you are taking. Let's get started. So today I'm using a released SAT grammar section, and I find SAT and ACT to be very helpful in finding new questions. So when people have exhausted all of their study guides and they're like, I want more practice, I always send them to either ACT or SAT. Today I'm working out of an SAT practice test. Now you can get released SAT practice tests from College Board themselves. They release their tests with answer explanations and the answers on their website, and I'll show you how to get those. All you have to do is Google released SAT practice test, and you're going to want to grab this free official SAT practice test, and you want this to say College Board. There's going to be a lot of ads and things like that. If you Google this, you want to click the College Board one. College Board is the company that makes the SAT. And so when you click that, it'll take you to this site here, and you can download the practice test there. When you click this See All, you'll see that this is the practice test. They even have a practice essay, and then they have answer explanations, which is super helpful, but you can also just grab the answers here. And then there's an answer sheet for bubbling, which you don't really need if you're taking it on the computer. But if you're here to help yourself with your SAT practice, I definitely recommend printing the bubble sheet and practicing bubbling as you go, because it takes time and you want to factor that into your timing if you are working on your SAT. So this is where I got today's practice. I highly recommend, if you are struggling with grammar or math or reading, you check out SAT and ACT release tests so that you can get some more practice, so you can get that incremental practice in every single day. All right, so I'm just taking a general passage from the grammar section. So we're going to be working on grammar today. And you can see that numbers 12 through 22 go through this, and we're going to do those. We're actually just going to go to number 20 today. So let's take a look. It's called Dark Snow. We have a graph here, taking a look at things. Let's go straight to the question first. Which choice most accurately and effectively represents information in the graph? All right, so a couple things. If you get a question like this on any exam, you can analyze the graph, or you can take a look at what's going on here. So let's begin reading the paragraph, because it looks like I might need to know the paragraph before I answer this question. Most of Greenland's interior is covered by a thick layer of ice and compressed snow known as the Greenland ice sheet, okay? The size of the ice sheet fluctuates, meaning it goes up and down seasonally. In summer, average daily high temperatures in Greenland can rise to slightly above 50 degrees Fahrenheit, partially melting the ice. In winter, the sheet thickens as an additional snow falls, and average daily low temperatures can drop to as low as 20 degrees. Okay, so we're talking about this piece right here because number 12 goes with that. So it says, which choice most accurately and effectively represents the information in the graph? Now, it's saying here, the sheet thickens as additional snow falls and average daily low temperatures can drop. Well, let's see here. We have average daily low temperatures down here, which is the solid line. And it looks like it's not 20, but it's 12 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the high temperatures. So we could have used the graph to do this. Or another thing we could do is think about the grammar. Usually the shortest is the correct answer. So drop to 12 degrees Fahrenheit is the correct answer there, but the graph definitely helped us. So with SAT, sometimes you'll have a graph in with things which will help you. But if we're looking this from a grammar perspective, or looking at this from a grammar perspective, I should say, low temperatures can drop to as low as. Well, we just said low temperatures can drop. If you say to as low as, it's redundant, so no change is out. To their lowest point, again, low, lowest, redundant, taking out. To 10 degrees Fahrenheit and stay there for months seems long, When you see something really long, be careful because usually the shortest answer in grammar is the correct answer because anything too wordy is usually not correct. And if we looked at that and checked it with the graph, we could see it only goes as low as 12. So D would be out. And so B would be the correct answer. So you kind of have it as a graph, like checking it, against facts, but then also checking it in terms of the language. And this is also testing your knowledge of redundancy and getting rid of that. All right, so let's take a look at 13, 14, 15, and 16. Remember, I always want to look at my questions first just to kind of get an idea of what's going on. And so we can see most of these are grammar. Looks like I'm going to have to pick between like colons and semicolons here, some different sentences. Looks like I got it. All right, let's get started. For number 13, which choice most effectively combines the two sentences in the underlined portion? All right, this is going to be good because I can talk to you about dependent clauses and independent clauses and all of that. All right, let's start up here. Typically, the ice sheet begins to show evidence of thawing in late September, period, okay? This follows several weeks of higher temperatures. Okay, so we have two sentences there, two full sentences, two independent clauses. So we need either a comma and conjunction, which looks like we have that option here, or a semicolon, which we don't have that option. Right away, I know that this and is probably going to be out. Let's take a look at D really quickly, because remember, a conjunction alone is not enough. Let's plug D in just to get rid of it and see if it's not correct here. So we have typically the ice sheet begins to show evidence of thawing in late summer, and this evidence follows several weeks of higher temperatures. All right, first of all, it's very wordy. The evidence doesn't follow several weeks of high temperatures. It's the thawing that follows several weeks of high temperatures. So it looks like we're mixing up words here. And this and here is not enough to separate this evidence follows from the other independent clause. You need a comma conjunction. So D is out. Let's take a look at A because it is the shortest. And I love short answers when it comes to grammar here. So A, typically the ice sheet begins to show evidence of thawing in late summer, comma, following several weeks of high temperatures. Now, I like it because this comma is correct. It's separating an independent clause. The ice sheet begins to show evidence of thawing in late summer. That is the independent clause. Right here is the independent clause. And then if I put a comma following, now I have just a verb phrase, which is a dependent clause, and the comma by itself is fine. So you remember my video on how to spot a comma splice. That's when a comma incorrectly separates two independent clauses. In this case, if I do A, it's not doing that. It's separating an independent clause and a dependent clause, and it's the shortest one here. So I like it. I'm going to keep it. B, let's take a look. Let's discredit B and C. So we have the ice sheet begins to show evidence of thawing in late summer, and this thawing follows several weeks of high temperatures. Okay. The only thing I don't like about B, it is grammatically correct because the comma and makes it two independent clauses joined by the comma and conjunction. So you can have an independent clause, comma, and then another independent clause. That is A-okay. You can do that. However, we have thawing and then we have thawing. And remember what we just talked about redundancy and being overly wordy. And so B is going to be out and C is going to be out for the same reason because it talks about it again. So the shortest, simplest, easiest, briefest, I don't know, is briefest a word? The most brief answer choice is going to be A, and that is going to be the best one. Remember, be brief. That's very important in your writing and very important on a grammar exam. All right, now number 14, we can see that we are going to have to choose between transitional words here or transition phrases here. Let's take a look. So I need to read a little bit above in order to figure out what this transition part here is going to be. All right, so let's say we have the ice sheet begins to show evidence of thawing in late summer, following several weeks of high temperatures. For example, in the summer of 2012, virtually the entire Greenland ice sheet underwent thawing at or near its surface by mid-July, the earliest date on record. Okay, for example. So that means it's going to support the fact that Typically, thawing happens in the summer, but this just said mid-July. Now, this is what we call, it's definitely testing your transition sentence, but it's also testing your rhetorical, because I had to read a little bit into this. So we have thawing at or near the surface by mid-July. And this says typically summer. So for example, doesn't really help there. Let's cross off no change. Let's try however. Okay. Typically, the ice sheet begins to show evidence of thawing in late summer following several weeks of higher temperatures. However, in the summer of 2012, virtually the entire Greenland ice sheet underwent thawing at or near its surface by mid-July, the earliest date on record. So for this, I like however because it works here. Now, another trick here. As such and moreover kind of all mean the same thing as for example. Remember on a standardized test, here's a think like a test maker tip here. You want to cross off things that are kind of the same. Just like B and C here are kind of the same. We crossed those off in the answer 13. The same goes for A, C, and D. As such, moreover, and for example, kind of mean the same thing. However, is the drastic difference. And when I put it in, it works better because we're talking that by mid-July of this 1 year, it did not follow that typical pattern. So the best answer choice there is going to be B. So be careful. Be sure to be using those answer choices. All right, let's take a look at number 15. So it's down here around this area here. All right, let's start with the summer of 2012. The summer of 2012 was the warmest in 170 years, records show. But Jason Box, an associate professor of geology at Ohio State, believes that another factor added to the early thaw. All right, I'm going to wait to do number 16, but let's just go with, but Jason Box, an associate professor of geology at Ohio State, believes that another factor added to the early thaw. All right, here is what you need to understand. Sometimes an independent clause can be split in the middle. Let me show you. You have part of the clause here, then you have something in between here, and then you have a comma here, and then here. So really the independent clause starts here and ends here. And that's what's happening in this case, and they're testing to see if you can see that or not. What we're saying is Jason Box believes that another factor added to the early thaw. This, an associate professor of geology at Ohio State, is called an adjectival clause, and it's describing Jason Box. However, there's a problem here. You need a comma after this Ohio State, because essentially you should be able to take out that middle piece and read this and this as one independent clause. And when you put commas on both sides, you're essentially bracketing that out, pulling it out and throwing it away, and it'll read, right? So if I said Jason Box believes that another factor added to the early thaw, that would be good. So that's why I need a comma after Box and a comma after Ohio State. If you don't put the comma after Ohio State, you have a messy sort of run-on mush of independent and dependent clauses, and it doesn't work. So we need that comma after Box and Ohio State. So no change is going to be out. B is going to be out because I need that comma there. It's not there. C, there's a comma after Box and a comma after Ohio State. I like it. D, there's a comma after Box, and then they put a comma after geology. No, because that would read, Jason Box at Ohio State believes that another factor added to the early thaw. I mean, you could put at Ohio State, Jason Box at Ohio State, but it messes up this adjectival clause and doesn't connect that properly. So I would say no to D, making C the best answer choice there. All right, finally, let's take a look at number 16 here. So we've got this semicolon, and I talk a lot about semicolons. Remember, a semicolon has to separate two independent clauses that are related. Let's see if it does that the way it is. So Jason Box, an associate professor of geology at Ohio State, believes that another factor added to the early thaw. That is an independent clause. We could put a period there and it would be a sentence. And then it says, the dark snow problem. Well, the dark snow problem is not an independent clause. It does not have a subject and a predicate. It's just a noun clause. We have the dark snow problem. That's all nouns. The dark snow, dark is an adjective, but dark snow problem. All right, so the semicolon there is incorrect and should be removed. So no change is out. And also remember what I said here, we don't use, and if you go back to my punctuation, I have some videos on this that I'll link up in the description and you can find them here. But the thought, and we never do semicolon and, semicolon but, semicolon or. No, 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 no. Absolutely not. So anytime you see semicolon and, semicolon but, it's not your answer, crossing it off there. All right, let's talk about the colon in letter C, which is one of our answer choices. Will that work? Well, it will. Let's take a look. Box, an associate professor of geology at Ohio State, believes there is another factor to the early thaw. So I have an independent clause on that side, and then we have a colon, and then it says the dark snow problem. Then we have a definition here, or a very definitive thing that we're identifying, okay? So put identify here. Now, this is kind of an effect of a colon, a really good effect of a colon when you're writing. Basically, we're saying, what is the factor that added to the early thaw? The dark snow problem. This colon here basically says, I'm about to tell you what the early thaw problem was. And it tells you there. So you can do an independent clause, colon, and a definition, which is what is going on here. Or you could do an independent clause, which means it can stand on its own, and then a list. That's how you can use a colon. In this case, C is correct. D is not correct. Thaw being the dark snow effect, it's just adding extra words that you don't need, and don't do that. So cross that off. You can use a colon here. So it says Jason Box believes that another factor added to the early thaw, colon. Now we're going to tell you the dark snow problem. You can definitely use that colon there. All right, let's take a look at the last four problems here. Now we have 17, 18, 19 all look like grammar, and then 20 looks like a rhetorical question. I'll talk about that when we get to it. Let's just start here with 17, and I'm going to read all the way up here just so I have context of what's going on. You do kind of want to do that on a grammar exam. According to Box, a leading Greenland expert, tundra fires in 2012 from as far away as North America produced great amounts of soot. Some of it drifted over Greenland in giant plumes of smoke and then fell as particles onto the ice sheet. Ooh, that's a long sentence. All right, let's see what's going on here. We have the proper commas here. Notice what we just talked about before. According to Box, a leading Greenland expert, I could take out that leading Greenland expert and just say, according to Box, tundra fires in 2012 from as far away as North America produced great amounts of soot. So that's really good. But what I'm going to do here, so good job, SAT, you did that correctly. But let's start here with tundra fires, because this right here is an intro clause and I don't really need to consider it when I'm looking at number 17. So let's make tundra fires our subject, because that's what it is. Tundra fires in 2012 from as far away as North America produced great amounts of soot. All right, so basically I'm saying tundra fires produced great amount of soot. Is that an independent clause? Yes. So we have an independent clause on one side. Good. And then we have some of it drifted over Greenland in giant plumes of smoke. I'm going to end it there. Some of it is a subject, some, drifted over Greenland in giant plumes of smoke. That is also an independent clause. Well, what do we have between the two? A comma. And remember, from my previous video about a comma splice, you cannot have a comma separating two independent clauses. So right away, no change is out. Let's see what happens when we just put soot in for of it here. That doesn't change much because you have some soot drifted over Greenland in giant plumes of smoke. Again, making it an independent clause. And this comma alone here is not enough. So B is out. All right, let's take a look at C, of which. I like of which because I know sometimes when you add which to a sentence, W-H-I-C-H, it is going to turn it into a dependent clause. So we want to turn this independent clause into a dependent clause because we do not have the choice of changing this comma to anything. All right, so let's take a look at C, of which. So tundra fires in 2012 from as far away as North America produced great amounts of soot, some of which drifted over Greenland in giant plumes of smoke. That of which turns that independent clause into a dependent clause and is the correct answer there. Notice, understanding my comma helps for me to find the correct answer here. Now let's take a look at D, delete. I like delete the underlined portion because it's right a lot of the time. But if I just simply delete this, then I have some drifted over Greenland in giant plumes of smoke. Some is the subject, it's the noun. Drifted over Greenland is the predicate or the verb, and that makes it an independent clause still. So D is incorrect for the same reason A and B are incorrect. All right, let's take a look at 18. So we have falls, will fallen, had fallen. Looks like we're talking about tense here. So we have some of which drifted over Greenland in giant plumes of smoke and then fell. So we have drifted and fell. Whenever you're looking at tenses, make sure they match. And B is out because falls will be switching up the tenses. We don't want to do that. Will fall also switches up the tenses because you're going past tense, drifted, future tense, will fall, no. Then we had fallen, which is too wordy and doesn't make sense here. The best answer is it drifted and fell. Okay, make it simple. Drifted and fell as particles on the ice sheet, making no change, the correct answer there. All right, let's take a look at number 19. Looks like pronouns here. I'm going to have to figure out what the pronouns are. Let's take a look. I have this it is ability. All right, let's take a look. Start here. Scientists have long known that soot particles facilitate melting by darkening snow and ice, limiting its ability to reflect the sun's rays. Well, this it's here is actually, and let me go ahead and erase this so I can use this space. This it's equals it is. And I wouldn't say limiting it is ability to reflect the sun's rays. I'm actually showing possession, its ability. So it needs to be it's, not it is. However, let's take a look at what it's is talking about, which is snow and ice. Well, snow and ice are two things, which makes them plural, and its is a singular pronoun, so that's not right. There is not a possessive pronoun. That's the wrong there. So the correct answer is there. Snow and ice limiting their ability to reflect the sun's rays. Be careful. Just because you're looking for a substitute for its, the contraction, doesn't necessarily mean this is going to be it. Be careful. That was tricky. We want to make sure we look at our subject, snow and ice, which are the two nouns. So we need a pronoun that is plural, a possessive pronoun more specifically, and that's going to be D there. All right, let's take a look at number 20. I mentioned before that this is a rhetorical question. Rhetorical questions on grammar exams typically ask you to do things like, where would this sentence best be placed? What would be the best ending to this? What would be the best thing for the author to do X, Y, and Z? They're not really about grammar. These questions are more about rhetorical. What would you do if you were the author, so to speak? All right, so we have here, which choice best completes the description of a self-reinforcing cycle? So we want to complete the idea of, and this is self-reinforcing cycle. So you need to kind of have an idea what self-reinforcing is. To reinforce means to do it kind of again and again, to reinforce something or to like support something. So let's start right here. The result is a self-reinforcing cycle. As the ice melts, the land and water under the ice become exposed. And since land and water are darker than snow, the surface absorbs more heat, which is related to rising temperatures. Okay, so we have A there. Let's take a look at B. which raises the surface temperature. Remember what I said about things that are similar, is related to rising temperature, raises the surface temperature. Both seem the same. I'm going to be cautious of those two. So A and B right now are out for me because they're too much the same and they don't sound correct. Let's see C. Begins to cool at a certain point. Well, we're looking for a self-reinforcing cycle. And if we're talking about things becoming hot or building up heat, beginning to cool is not self-reinforcing. That's actually going against. So C is out. Let's look at D. Leads to additional melting. Remember I said self-reinforcing means to kind of do again and again. This is kind of a vocab question as well because you have to know what reinforce means. So let's add D to here and see how it sounds. All right, let's start again. The result is a self-reinforcing cycle. As the ice melts, the land and water under the ice become exposed. And since land and water are darker than snow, the surface absorbs even more heat, which leads to additional melting. So we have melting here, heat here, more melting here, making D the correct answer. And if we wanted to get into it, A and B just do not support what's going on in the sentence. All right, so I hope that helps you out today with your grammar. Remember, this is an SAT release test. I'll link it up in the description below. If you liked this video, consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much and have a great day. Thank you so much for watching. We have a ton of videos on my YouTube channel. Please consider subscribing and following me on my social media networks at Kathleen Jasper. Have a great day.